He sat at the back with the other farmers' sons, polishing their bums in the agricultural stream, a place to dream of dragging tines with a bridal veil of gulls behind, and cows, like starving Sudanese, mud-stained knees, following one relentless track, their pendulating tits, all ribs and hips, their skins threadbare coats upon a rack. Then Lincoln, for a quick diploma, rugby games, and then a roam around the expat dives of London town, a combi van trip to Europe's historic features, to chunder with the lager louts on various Grecian beaches, then home in the fall to marry the girl from the Craighead debutante ball, Felicity. They called her Flick. We shared a flat for one eventful art school term. The Little Fire Engine was the name she earned on account of keeping us all awake those nights that Tom stayed far too late. Well, the wedding was a drab affair. Hooray, Henrys everywhere. The usual penis cast from ice. The band played the bird song. They played it twice. While the best man shuffled his notes, an endless string of Christmas cracker jokes. And when at last the couple departed, tin cans and condom balloons strung out behind, Tommy's old man saluted and farted, and all the good college boys saluted in kind and gave 3 cheers, and then drifted inside to finish the beers. And as I watched the tail lights diminish, I wondered how it would finish this game of rings. What would become of our dear friend living at the unforgiving end of things? I'd been in France, painting everything that caught my unaccustomed eye. Everything's unaccustomed under a foreign sky. When I came home wanting to be alone, Henry Thoreau clutched to my chest, knowing that the meat tastes best closest to the bone. I found this place, lying half defeated by the railway tracks, old machinery, wheat sacks, a history of plenty scribbled on the empty silo walls, and the names of men who worked amid the stalls and wheeled the bags between the flapping belts of leather linking all the 5-ton grinding mills together. You've blown your money now, the people said, my father being newly dead, but he never, my old man, left me a penny, not hard cash or property. I earned this mill properly by sitting still before an easel one long winter, adding and subtracting light, splinter by splinter. And as I worked to fix the place, my hands grew hard, my arms like vines. Up and down these broken stairs I dragged my tools each day, sometimes 50 times. Hammers, beams, and nails to go, to make a studio for one where once a thrumming choir of iron spoke and shook these walls like fucking Jericho. I met her at the store by chance. I hadn't heard a thing of her since heading off for France. I recognized her hair. I remembered how it bobbed as she tripped lightly down the stair to Tom. She smiled, she seemed all right. 2 children, one of each, the requisite amount in a world already burdened to the teeth. And how's your prince, I said. Still charming. Oh, he's all right, she said. He's trying something new. Organic farming. Come by tonight, we're having veal. Looks like you need a meal. And I did, and Tom and I became the best of friends. Well, just as close as farmers over veal and parsnips ever come to liking artists. Feel the dirt, he said. Hold it in your hand. That's the way you measure if the land is good. It's not the crop you measure or the yield, it's the earth, the stuff beneath the field. I'd never heard a farmer talk like this. It seemed heresy to me. Especially Tom, who'd learned to farm at his father's knee, to spray a field until nothing moved and then plant what only he, like God, approved. But in the end, when the sheep got lice, he took the easy way, used a pyrethrum spray, didn't think twice. They found him out of course, and he lost his registration. From then on, organics for Tom was an unequal equation, and he wouldn't hear it mentioned without a sneer. Bloody greenies, dreamers, they don't know what the price of cream is. The world is starving, it's our job to feed them. They should treat farmers like heroes, not constantly bloody bleed them. Tom was given his farm by an uncle who lived down near Fairley. Now, a man who's never had to earn what he has never knows what he's worth. Not really. And he was always afraid that one day, like the rain, it would all disappear just as quick as it came. So he always bought old, he never bought new. Even the ring on Flick's hand had known a finger or two. And one day in the city she saw a dress that was so pretty in the window of Valentine's store, and she implored him, "Thomas, just this once, and I promise I won't ask for anything more. Let me feel new again." Tom laughed, and he walked down the street for a while, till he noticed he'd lost his bride. Then he turned, and he saw her still standing alone by the window, her hands hanging limp by her side. There were people up and down the street. It was as if he couldn't see the crowd. "Get in behind you, bitch," he called, and then realized he'd said it out loud. David in 1984 was everything we've been longing for. Orwell got it wrong, we said. The wicked witches of the West were dead, and we opened the gates to this bloated Trojan horse, this Methodist lay preacher. And how could you doubt such a roly-poly creature? But that night, as we lay curled in bed, dreaming of a better world, instead the Trojan buttocks began to part, and with a prime ministerial fart, out popped Douglas Preble-Cagle, envoys from the Business Round Table, neoliberals to a man, who duly pulled out their knives and began to vivisect our lives. They cut up our country from shoulder to arse, gave all the best parts to their mates, leaving us alone with plates of gristle and bone. We would have phoned someone to complain, but they'd sold the phones and the trains and the water now. What remains of it is owned by the Chinese, thanks to Mr. Keyes carrying on with Roger's unfinished agenda to surrender ultimate consent to the fucking 1%. There once was a stream, meandering pretty. It's where I'd take those special friends who'd come up from the city. It's where the kids used to hunt for trout or an eel sliding out through the shade of a willow, and the stones were white and clean. There's no sanctuary anywhere can compare with a braided stream. Then one day the dairy farmers came, a different breed of men, no heading dogs for them, no hunterways, no mustering down the Perrendale strays. Northern men with bankers' smiles come to buy 200 miles of river fan, the Canterbury Plains. Their plan to take each massive river from its bed and pour it on the stones instead. They cut the trees, they burned the shelter belts in pyres. You could see the fires, one plume of smoke caught in the winter air, like the flag of an invading army, calmly spreading destruction everywhere. All this was ecocide, of course, but Smith came down and put the rule of law aside by force, and all our streams began to rot, and there is not one river I can drink from now that doesn't taste to me of industrial cow. The stream I mentioned, not far from here where each midsummer we'd go, began to disappear. We complained, the farmers in question were named, a committee of councillors came in a bus just to listen to us. Anna, with a child at her breast, told of midsummer and the best of things, lying in a pool with the water cool running round their chins, and the pony rides through the deepest swales, sliding off the saddle, clinging to the tails, adrift. There's no accountant born can put a price on this kind of gift. Then little Sammy Zeno, 30, still cute, stood up in his father's funeral suit and read from a paper he held in his hand clearly that the councillors should understand. The river never ran, as Anna had said, that in the midsummer the river always went dead. Sam and his brother farmed with their mother just down from the gorge, taking all the good water as a matter of course, and Anna was weeping. I'd seen her cry before, but not in such a public place. How could he do that, she asked. How could he stand there and lie
and lie to my face?
I heard that she'd left the valley and taken her children north. I went to see Tom, found him standing on the porch with his old man's gun. He rolled a cigarette, let it split the tobacco from the tip of his tongue. I followed him up to the back of the farm, through a paddock of rye as long as your arm. Never thought this paddock would yield, he said, thought it too sour, thought the soil was dead, thought the lime would affect it. Goes to show how things grow when you least expect it. And we sat and he smoked with the gun on his knees, and he pointed out places where they'd planned to plant trees, and the acre where one day he'd build a new house of white pine and larch, and they'd sit and grow old while the sun rolled down the edge of a northwest arch. St. Peter came by on Mondays. It was his day for misbehaving. It's such a relief, he would say in a self-disregarding way, to have scones with a soul not worth saving. I poured him his tea, he looked at me and he said, "Have you noticed the violence everywhere?"
Have you noticed the violence everywhere?
I said, "Aren't you being a little ecumenically unfair? I mean, surely not the Anglicans."
Yes, them too.
He said, his pain as plain as unleavened bread.
These quiet homespun men in worsted ties and polished boots, they look up at me on Sundays with pale, sun-bleached eyes. They get up at the end, shyly smile goodbye, then go on home, to slit a throat alone in the killing shed, like you and I would slice a loaf of bread.
He shook his head and passed a plate to me. "This blood-soaked fraternity stretches across eternity
From Isaac to Afghanistan. Have an Afghan, Sam."
I did, and as he walked away I thought of Frank, that old man, and the day he killed a lamb for me. I'd mowed his lawns while he was overseas, you see, and said he'd pay me back with meat. The blood steamed on the earth, the rattle of the hook and chain, the flop of innards like a stillborn birth, and Farmer Frank, his great hands stained like he'd been picking autumn berries by the river, separated the kidneys and the liver, washed away the gore and grit, picked up all the rest and headed for the awful pit. But I remember this. His silhouette against the opening of the barn, a fading sky, woolen trousers, crumpled hat, wind-crimped eye, already stooped, this kind old man, and in each hand a severed head and 30 pounds of guts dragging at his side like a road-killed cat wandering off to die. "There's violence everywhere," he said. And then there was the tour. The church must make a stand, he said, without demur. And one by one the elders stood and left the vestry. No one said a fucking word. Oh, the hypocrisy. Their uncles fought for freedom and democracy. And every year they count the dead. But freedom in Johannesburg? No, these Christians on the hill wanted rugby games instead. But that's all right. Obviously, democracy is white. 6 weeks on, Pete was gone, and that troublesome debate about church and state ceased with the leaving of the priest. There are more women on the vestry now than men, but the wind still blows as it blew back then, whipping round the rusting tines, the straining post, his surplice on the washing line, dancing like the Holy Ghost. Tom's old man was an elder in the vestry. Tom's old man got a ballot farm courtesy. Tom's old man kept Robbie in the driving seat every 3 years, gave his vote to the national seat, then slipped off with the wife for whiskey with the squattocrats, slapping each other's backs. Another 3 years of him, then that grin, thinking of the $1 billion subsidy, thinking of the hardship grant for a kid at university. Which is odd when you think there was money in the bucket for a private education. Well, fuck it, they're a proud beneficiary of this backbone of the nation. If there's a river flowing free, there's a dollar being lost. Privatize the profit boys, socialize the cost. Privatize the profit boys, externalize the cost. So Tom's old man had something to say. Came up to me on the annual walkway fun run day and said, "What you need to understand, Sam, is you're privileged." I said, "What?" He said, "Farmers got to work, know what I'm saying? I mean, nothing hard by it. I mean, it's good that you're staying, but you're privileged." Well, you've got to find something, always a word, a way to build a fence between us, no matter how absurd. Used to call me Bludger over their tea and scones, until someone saw my name one day on a very expensive piece of bronze. I said, "Privileged?" He said, "Yeah, I don't mean to be unpleasant." I said, "No one gave me a farm for a birthday present." "But you've got to admit, you're a socialist," you'd have to say. I said, "Well, that's nice. Like Steinbeck, Hemingway, Jesus Christ." He looked hurt, he turned and walked away. He's dead just now. Went up to that place in the clouds, Presbyterians only, right next to that place for cows. And Tom began to drift away. His Presbyterian nose for easy pay led him to the Zeno boys and the others. He was enchanted with the toys the brothers had at hand, the ill-begotten products of intensely irrigated land. We used to mark the passing of each year beneath the limestone cliff. We'd come to sift old ideas, a few old friends, beers, the old Dutch oven he'd found, venison stew, potatoes browning, someone passing a guitar around, and now he sat at a table spread with cordon bleu instead, having himself an excellent time, mispronouncing the names of wine, and everyone wearing suits and a banker or two, drowning his principal in champagne flutes. And when the plague came to test us and we were ordered indoors, down in the valley the chainsaws roared, restless, calling to each other, brother to brother. Up and down the valley this exchange of complaint, countless teeth gnawing at the jaws of constraint. Everyone was willing. Everyone had to pay, except Tom. What he had to say was, in times like these, the Federation shouldn't be paying environmental protection fees. Why, we're the very heart of the GDP. Give us a break, mate. Give us a fair do. After all, we're different from you. And so I hit him then, as hard as I could. It was like hitting a sack full of wet firewood. He just stood and stared like he didn't understand. I stood there nursing my broken hand. Then he climbed in his truck and he drove away. And the dust closed around him. And to this day, I can't see him clearly. All I can see is this vague shape moving away, and it scares me. The water never came for him, that promise of vast, unearned sums. So he sold his father's farm, half built on taxpayer funds, and took his tax-free capital gain, moved up to Nelson to practice parsimony all over again. I imagine on an evening he stands at the edge of the tide, and he wonders what it's like for Felicity and her life on the other side. As an artist, I never wanted things. I never wanted this world full of golems chasing rings. I already owned what was of the most value, ideas, and can you imagine a more beautiful garden in the world, and the rivers that once swirled clean down the flanks of this once green land, the commons, the property of every man. My father's gifts to me were birds, words, and infinity, of fields and streams, a falcon's eye, and he left me the gun that used to lie across his arm on autumn evenings while we waited for the ducks to slide from a rain-stained sky. That stream I mentioned, I asked Kegel one day when we'll get it back. He didn't know what to say. In 40 years, perhaps, he said, but it'll happen by small degrees. When 40 years have lapsed, he's dead, drinking wine with Mephistopheles. No one to this day, green, red, or blue, can say when the damage done will be fixed by anyone. But here's an idea. When the PR guys who turned desire into obsession, quoting Edward Bernays' creed of how possession of government is down to sexy branding and democracy is down to sleight of handing, when these tailors of invisible raiments are refused all payments, when these unelected voices are deemed unlawful, our rivers could run once more full. When the shock jock cocks on the talkback media are seated at the back alongside pedophilia, when Michelle Bogue and Cactus Kate and Duncan Gardner emigrate, when Hoskin Slater and Matthew Hootens, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin are dancing quadrilles in the fires of Hades, it's not a promise, just a maybe, the rivers could run again. When the oil runs dry, when the bankers fail, when our children put every last boomer but one in jail, when the Greens stop making compromises just to stay in office, when they fail to renege on every fucking promise, and if Eugenie Sage, when beginning a political dirge, could allow just one small joke to emerge, when every politician who has violated our trust, promising diamonds, delivering rust, when we take each last one and put them on a raft, John Key at the prow, Shane Jones aft, Parker, like Nero, standing in the middle, playing the lyre instead of the fiddle, and send them off with a shovel and a spade to repair the damage they made from Nauru Island to Western Sahara in order that we should be the world's best farmer, then maybe the rivers could run again. World's best farmer. What a joke. But I remember a southern man before he broke, and a song without a rhyme, as he ran his dog out on that invisible line along the valley and over the hill. Away, Joe, away, come by, Joe, stay, steady, steady, I'll lie down, Joe, lie. Oh, do you, you little clown. Away, Joe, steady, come round. That'll do, Joe. Let him go. Get him behind, you little beauty. Where to go? And she looks up at him with that drooling grin, her tongue lolling over the side, and he looks back at her with that kind of love hard men dress up as pride. And as Tom tugs his heel stick out of the loam, the mist rolls in from the sea, and the two of them turn and wander off home, and into the best of my used to be, and into the best of